The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Samuel Langford Clemens was born in Missouri in 1835. He was the son of a lawyer. Early in his childhood, the family moved to Hannibal, Missouri, a town which would provide inspiration for St. Petersburg in Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. After a period spent as a traveling printer, Clemens became a river pilot on the Mississippi, a time he could look back upon as his happiest. When he turned to writing in his 30s, he adopted the pseudonym Mark Twain. Mark Twain is the cry of a Mississippi boatman taking depth measurements and means to fathoms, and a number of highly successful publications followed, including Tom Sawyer, 1876, The Prince and the Pauper, 1882, and A Connecticut Yankee, 1889. His later life, however, was marked by personal tragedy and sadness, as well as financial difficulty. In 1884, several businesses in which he had invested failed, and he was declared bankrupt. Over the measure of financial independence, he saw the deaths of two of his beloved daughters and his wife. Increasingly bitter and depressed, Mark Twain died in 1910 at the age of 75. This book, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, introduces himself, Huckleberry Finn, as a character from the book prequel to his own, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Huckleberry Finn explains that at the end of that book, he and his friend Tom Sawyer discovered a robber's cache of gold and consequently became rich, but that now Huck lives with a good but mechanical woman, the widow Douglas, and her holier than tough sister, Miss Watson. However, rather than be civilized by the widow, Huckleberry Finn, the grabby, good-natured son of a local drunk, sets off with Jim, an escaped slave, to find freedom on the Mississippi River. With the law on their tail, they navigate a world of robbers, slave hunters, and con men, and Huck must choose between what society says is right and his own book-going understanding of Jim's friendship and humanity. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn was completed in late 1883 and published 2 years later. Twain had started work on the novel almost immediately after finishing Tom Sawyer in 1876, and to begin with, his rate of work was astonishing. During the summer of that year, he wrote several hundred pages of manuscript representing what could eventually become the first half of the book, up to and including the wrecking of Huck and Jim's raft by the steamboat. Unfortunately, after this crucial juncture, Twain reached an impasse in the narrative, and several years of difficult and painstaking work followed. However, a return visit to his hometown of Hannibal, Missouri in 1882 and another sight of his beloved Mississippi seemed to give Twain the impetus he needed, and Huckleberry Finn was finally done. Its author, Mark Twain, downplayed his achievement, describing it as just another boy's book, or a mere companion piece to Tom Sawyer, darker and more adult than its brother companion. Huckleberry Finn is the erratic genius of Twain at its absolute best. It manages to blend nostalgic, yet strangely and sentimental evocations of life on the river 40 to 50 years ago, with uncomfortable and disturbing undercurrents of aggression and human cruelty. Huckleberry Finn is exuberant, full of life, and is a perfect treatise on the great American preoccupation, freedom, the concept of personal liberty is the book's dominating theme. The book is tied up with its characters and setting, its narrative style, and in many ways its composition. Freedom For Twain does not necessarily mean the ability to do exactly what one wants, but it entails being able to escape the restrictions and hypocrisies that society imposes upon the nature of a man, to define one's own identity and one's own moral code, and to strike out alone. One of the most compelling things about the character of Huckleberry Finn is the freedom of thought and the fact that he is entirely self-made. When Huck sets off on his journey, he does so, of course, on the Mississippi River. This immense body of water which bears Huck and Jim nearly 1,000 miles down south is a character and a power in its own right, symbolic of the kind of unfettered existence which Huck and Jim both crave. For Mark Twain, too, the Mississippi symbolized freedom of a different kind, a lost Eden of liberty and contentment. Twain was not a happy man in later life. In Huckleberry Finn, therefore, the Mississippi symbolizes personal liberty for both its characters and its author. It represents the notion of being entirely independent of society and servitude. All of these liberating influences, however, are somewhat negated by the closing chapters of the book, in which Huck and Jim return to the kind of society that they have so successfully managed to escape. Perhaps Twain wanted to leave the friend where he had found them, so that they are free and have a new set of adventures in different times and different places. The literature of the American South. Thanks for watching.